I put a spell on you.
Welcome to I Put a Spell on You. Eddie Hurst's Wonderfull Discoverie of Witches podcast. Oh gosh, sorry. Oh god, I sat on the haunted piano. I don't know why I put it next to the microphone. But welcome to I Put a Spell on You with me, Eddie Hurst, the show where we invite guests on to talk about their careers, their lives, and crucially, use the finest in pre-modern magic to help solve all of their problems. Hark! And alas, we are joined this week by the fantastic Joz Norris. He is a comedian, actor, writer, radio personality. Is he a radio personality? I don't know. Maybe he's a personality on the radio. I guess that doesn't. I'll ask him in this. But he's known for making ambitious, high-concept, funny work that is silly and playful whilst also exploring existential emotional themes. His show, Joz Norris is Dead, Long Live Mr. Fruit Salad, saw Joz Norris die, as the first four words of that title would suggest, being replaced by a comedy character called Mr. Fruit Salad, and it explored lost friendships, identity, and also whether you could scream freak out at an audience and still have them on board for the show. And evidently it worked. He won the Comedian's Choice Award for Best Show, and he was nominated for a Malcolm Hardy Award for Comic Originality, Chortle Award for Best Musical and Variety Act, and it can be watched on Go Faster Stripe if you want to stream that. Alongside that, he's also created a sitcom for BBC Radio 4 called The Dream Factory, and is currently producing a crowd-funded sitcom pilot called The Happiness Chain. This year, he'll be taking his new show, You Wait, Time Passes. I don't know if you have to say it like that, but I've chosen to. He's taken that to the Edinburgh Fringe, where he, at long last, unveils his life's work. Joz is also a well-known director of other people's comedy shows, including previous guest Keris Bradley's Sport Person, and my show, Eddie Hurst's Wonderfull Discoverie of Witches in the Countie of Himself, which this is the associate podcast to. You can see it at the Edinburgh Fringe, 2:20pm at Roxy downstairs. It's also going to go on a tour of the UK in a little bit, which I'll put more. We talk about a lot in the interview, about his work and his career, but particularly about directing shows, which I think sometimes is something in the world of comedy that is not as well known, and it was something, certainly until I worked with Joz on this show, I wasn't that aware of. So I hope that's of interest either as you listening, as maybe a performer in your own right, or as a comedy fan who wants to find out a bit more about how the sausage is made, the comedy sausage. So it's like a sausage, but it has the glass, you know, the Groucho Marx glasses, or a fez on, or I don't know. Sausages are already kind of funny, aren't they? Maybe I'll ask Joz about that, see what he thinks too. But we talk about my show and the show that we worked on. We talked about his experience of working on other shows. We also talk about tarot, as he's a keen tarot reader, user and sharer. And we attempt to solve his very, very 21st century problem of how, like, he's going to have to explain it, but it's like not being able to send files very easily from your phone to your computer. And it was quite a hard one to try and find some solution to, but I'm pretty satisfied with where we got. But whether it works or not, we'll have to wait and listen till the end. You can follow Joz at Joz Norris on most social media things, and he will be doing his show You Wait Time Passes at 7:10 every night, except for, I'm sure, a day or two, at the Pleasance Dome. Why not go see it? Why not? That's meant to be rhetorical, but I realised I added an extra why not, which the tone really sounded like I was waiting for you to answer. Actually, you know what? Let's take a moment, I think, and if you do want to say why you might not, there you go. But I would go see it, because Joz is great, and I really enjoyed the conversation we had here and the chat that we got to do. And he also shares about how he listens to albums, which, you know, good for him, but I could not do that myself. So let me know what you think of that. You can follow me at EDYHURST. You can like, you can subscribe, you can tell people about the show. Please do review it helps people find it. And last but not least, I do have my crowdfunder that's still going for covering costs of Ed Fringe and the tour afterwards, and also, you know, making this podcast in a lot of ways. So, you know, if you're listening and you think, yeah, I want to support that. I mean, I know admittedly we're like 5 minutes in. It might be a little soon to do that, but maybe at the 20-minute mark, I think 20 minutes is reasonable. You think, oh yeah, I want this to carry on. Why not go to the Crowdfunder and fund it? There's some awards that I think you can get still from that, and that'll be in the episode description down there, along with links to Joz and my show. Let's get into our conversation on iPod A Spell on You with actor, comedian, radio personality, Joz Norris. I said in the intro that I recorded, I called you a radio personality. Like, when do you think somebody tips over from, like, being a person who makes radio to a radio personality?
Into radio personality. I feel like, I feel like technically I've done almost nothing on radio where my personality itself has been present. I feel like I've done a lot of acting on radio. To be a radio personality, you've got to do more stuff on radio where all you're doing there is just your personality, and that's it. You know, like, hey, we're talking about whether crisps are better than leaves. Let us know your thought. You know, the kind of stuff where the content really doesn't matter. It's just you. It's just the vibes you're bringing. I feel like most of what I've done on radio has been vibes. And then kind of like dense, complicated plot. So I feel like, I don't know if that constitutes as a radio personality.
But you do use your name in all of it.
That's true. I do always play myself. Yeah. So, yeah, maybe radio person. Maybe I've got the first half down, and now I've got to work on the ality of it.
You've made Radio 4 shows. Alongside that, you have a large body of live work. Of really interesting shows, very high concept, where you do play a version of yourself in them as well. Yeah,
keep doing that.
And how would you, so for listeners who might not have seen your work before, how would you describe it to them?
I guess it's sort of, I still kind of like navigate my own understanding of what it is, like show by show, I think. And it's basically character comedy, what I do. I'm sort of at a point with this current show where for a while I've been in the space of being like, oh, is it a stand-up show about my life, or is it a character show about an imaginary thing? And actually, can it be both? And do I need to decide? And the further you get into a show, you kind of get to a point where you're like, you have to choose one or the other at some point, because you need to give audiences like a clear on-ramp for what it is they're watching. But basically, everything I do kind of sits in this middle ground where it's a slightly absurdist kind of meta-narrative thing about a character who is me, essentially, but everything that's happening is fictional. So my last show, I was the world's greatest magician. In this one, I've completed my life's work. There are always things that are like sort of adjacent to what's actually going on in my life at the moment, but are sort of like metaphorical, fictional narrative things. And I'm realising the more of this sort of work I make, it's easier for me to just start saying, do you know what? I'm a character. Comedian. That's just easier for people to understand, rather than all this stuff like, oh, come on. Stop making it so hard for people to wrap their heads around it.
I find it interesting as a thing that is hard to explain to an audience, because in some ways I feel like that's a little more honest in terms of like,
yeah,
you know, because most stand-up comedians like stand up with a microphone, they go on stage and say, I'm going to tell you this crazy story about the time I was on a cruise with no toilets.
Yeah.
And it's like, obviously there'll be fabrications in there and there'll be stuff in that. And we all know, like deep down, if you take a minute and you think about it, this person is not telling us this for the first time. This person has written this out and thought all of the words, and they're presenting a part of themselves in that.
Yeah.
Whereas that extra step of going, I'm writing this as somebody who is deliberately not real for you to think about what else I'm doing.
Yeah, I always think it's not that far of a leap from what stand-up already is, but I think that's because people like us are so obsessively like interested in the art of what people do with comedy. So we're like, well, we take this as a given that there's this kind of like trade-off between truth and fiction, between performer and audience. But for a lot of audiences, they're like, no, I don't take that as a given. I don't think about this obsessively all the time. So actually, like, yeah, I'm sort of learning how to preserve all the things that interest me in terms of like how to play with what's real and what's not, but make things clearer for audiences at the same time, so that you're not just needlessly complicating things. And I think that's what happens as you like grow through making shows. I think when you start out, you're very much like, I'm just going to make the thing that interests me, and people will get it or they won't. And then gradually, the more you make, I think you get better at closing the gap between like trying to do the ambitious, innovative thing you want while also making it something that an audience can just simply understand and enjoy. Because after a while you're like, oh wait, no, I do want people to enjoy this. I don't just want to make something that only I like.
What was the first show you made?
The first show I made was called Joz Norris Has Gone Missing. It was in 2013. And it was sort of a concept that's been done a lot of, like, Joz Norris isn't here, so these 4 characters are filling in sort of flimsy premise to hang a bunch of stupid characters off. And it was quite... I mean, I did it at the time when doing the Fringe wasn't a huge, like, colossal financial undertaking, so it was possible to go up with something that was a bit flimsy and was just, I'm just going to play in these 4 different characters and, like, build my skills as a performer. And that's sort of what it was. So it was like, it was not the best thing I've made, but I think in terms of just giving myself a playground to, like, experiment and mess around and, like, build a bit of an audience and build my own confidence in what I was doing, it was all right.
Interesting thinking as a character comedian, because I think that makes total sense.
Yeah.
In a way. And also, it's one of the things that, like, you look at I think any comedy film, rather than just live comedy that's on stage, and it is kind of like, you know, Buster Keaton went to the West.
Yeah.
Buster Keaton was on a boat.
Yeah.
Buster Keaton... Oh, what's he up to this time? Probably some hijinks, but nevertheless, it shall be the Buster Keaton we know doing something.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
even, like, I think until very recently, really, and maybe it's coming back, but, like, you know, Will Ferrell was like, Will Ferrell goes to jail.
Yeah.
Will Ferrell has to put on a game night at his house or something like that. And it's always that, like, we know this personality is in this situation.
Yeah,
but then the change to comedy, I wonder if it's like you're introducing yourself constantly, because... the point is that, like, people don't know that personality yet necessarily. Yeah,
a little bit. And it's always interesting. Like, again, we're sort of recording this when I'm just in the middle of, like, prepping a show for this Edinburgh. That's sort of like where the timeline is. And it's at that time where you just start to really drill down into, like, what is and isn't working. And gradually I'm realizing that the changes I have to make to this one essentially make it like an updated version of the last show I did, in a way. Like, the structure of it is a similar thing. And the specifics are all different and the story is different, but you gradually realise, like, you do just keep kind of... I think we all sort of make variations of the last thing we did, in a way. And the temptation is always to be like, I'm going to do something completely different that moves in, like, the opposite direction. And that was sort of the original impulse behind this show. But in the end, you always end up doing something that's just like a slightly evolved version of before, if you know what I mean.
Can you talk to us about your new show?
I can do, yeah. I'd be very happy to.
Okay, that's good. Next question I've got. Just a cheeky...
it was good. That was nice. A little rug pull.
Thanks, Joz. Your show's going up to the Fringe this year?
Yeah. So that's in Edinburgh in August. Like I said, I have completed my life's work, is the premise, and now I'm going to unveil it to an audience for the first time. But at the same time, what is it and why and what am I going to do next? That's the idea behind it. So it's sort of a nonsense thing about what do you do after you've done the thing that you've been waiting to do for a very long time. It's sort of about waiting and not doing enough with your life or with your time, essentially. But yeah, it's funny that, like, so the previous show I did was about me playing a very deluded magician who was going to pull off the world's greatest magic trick. So sort of similar structures of that thing of, like, I'm going to do this incredible thing. And I'm not saying, I'm now describing this as though people are just going to come and watch exactly the same thing again, which I don't mean, because it's a very different show. But it is funny when you sense your brain being like, oh, this is a pattern that my brain likes going into. So you have to, like, innovate enough within it while also knowing that, like, your brain likes going to these places and it's going to find good stuff there.
And have you been enjoying what question is this? Forget this. Let's go on to something. I was just going to be like...
No.
And have you been enjoying the previews?
It's been awful.
Have you enjoyed the previews?
It's been absolutely awful, actually. I don't know why I'm doing this. I've been having a miserable time. The audiences hate it. I feel not creatively fulfilled, or I take no joy from the making of this show. Yeah, that's the honest answer. No, I'm having a lovely time.
Good, I'm glad to hear it. You also, alongside radio things that you've done and your live work, you've also, I think, and this probably isn't true, but at least in my head, as somebody who, like, for the listeners, we've worked together for a few years now on the show that the podcast is a spin-off of, but also you've got your night egg box, where you share your own films and you share other people's films in there. And have you always made films? Has that always been part of your work, or is this a newish
It's
change?
always sort of been something I do on the side, and it's only recently been something that I've told myself, like, wait, I actually really like and care about doing that. But, like, the thing that got me into comedy was things like Peep Show and The Mighty Boosh and Garth Marenghi and Alan Partridge and Flight of the Conchord. Like, it was scripted TV comedy that got me into it. And a lot of what I've written, like, all my live shows tend to be quite dialogue based. Like they're often about a character in dialogue with something. Like there's a lot of phone calls, or there's a lot of like forced dialogue with audience members where I kind of cast an audience member in a role, or conversations with offstage voices. So I've always written things that are basically about characters in conflict with something, because I think the form of, hello, I'm just a person stood on stage telling you things from my perspective, has never really interested me. I'm much more interested in like characters in positions of conflict. So I've sort of always written little sketches on the side and tried to make little web series and things like that. And it's sort of always been something I've done with very like low production value of like just trying my best to like churn out the odd thing here or there. I've done a couple of things that were like more high effort over the years, but mostly it's been like, oh, what if I did this silly little short thing? And then I think it was, I'm trying to remember what the film would have been, but maybe about 3 years ago, I think I started, because Miranda, my girlfriend, who I make a lot of stuff with, who's a writer-director herself, is very much in the kind of film world. And I think because it's something I've always wanted to do more of, it made sense for us to be like, well, let's try and actually do this properly and make films where we spend money on them and we accept that that's part of what you do. And we really collaborate with people. And instead of just trying to film it on our cheap camcorder, we work with DOPs and with sound people, and we get a team together. And that's been incredible to do more of that, because I just think, I mean, well, it's like a show. You see the results. It's like, as you know from like putting a team together around the Witches show, like when you make something with a whole creative team and everybody's like looking after their part of it, you then look at the results and you're like, oh my God, this is something I couldn't have done by myself, which obviously makes sense. Like we know that, but something about the process of going through that and seeing what you can do when you collaborate with a big team is like transformational, I think, for your thinking. And I could never again go back into the thing, I think, of being like, well, I've had an idea and I'm just going to do it all by myself because, you know, I will. It's, it just shifts the way you approach things, I reckon.
And you kind of have to have a plan. I feel like that's something that terrifies me about working with other people. Yeah. Is that you can't just be... I think I figured that, like, when we worked on... Wonderfull Discoverie, Eddie Hurst's Wonderfull Discoverie of Witches in the Countie of Himself. I think one of the things when we started working together, which was great and has been great, is that I think I realised quite quickly when I was doing a lot of the dramaturgy, which is for is a word that is fairly new to me, which I quite like because it sounds like metallurgy. Which I know, of course, from Age of Empires. Oh yeah, it's like, oh, we're getting some suits of armour here. Yeah. And dramaturgy is very much the suit of armour of the theatrical world.
Yeah, of the theatre world.
I think, so people who come in with narratives, and I think it's like in the comedy world, you'll probably work with a director who I think essentially also acts as dramaturg in the way that theatre folks would say. And so working with those guys, a lot of the time I was like, I've brought like 5 vague ideas, which I think similar to how you make shows are like, well, I want this conflict, I want this event to happen, I want this event to happen, because all of my career for the most part is performing in 10 to 20 minute chunks, and then every now and then I get to do my hour shows, which is where people step into my world. But for the most part, it's what can I translate from that also lets me check if that's funny to an audience in the build-up. And I think that's one of the things with film and working with teams. It's like, oh shit, actually, I need more than just I think I'm probably going to have a big puppet here for 10 minutes and it'll wobble a lot. So that'll be funny as it enters the room, and then it'll probably just respond to an audience, see what an audience member thinks, and we'll
find something.
Kind of do
we'll
it.
Find someone in the room.
That's at least 3 to 5 minutes, and then I might record a song, but I've not really thought of that bit yet.
And I still think that sort of stage of it is so useful for just the generating of idea. Like, I think if it was that sort of blank page thing of you have to come up with something from scratch and it has to have this very like clear worked out plan to it, I would feel completely lost. And I think whether it's with film or with a live show, you still need that bit where you're like, well, I'm just going to mess around in front of some small audiences for a while with some like half ideas and see which ones start to take shape. Or with film stuff, it's always like, if I have an idea that vaguely makes me chuckle a bit, then I will just write 2 pages worth of it to see if there's anything. And sometimes I'll get to the end of the 2 pages and be like, no, this is nothing. This is just like a thought I had. And sometimes I'll get through it and be like, well, what I've written is rubbish, but I've found the thing in it that actually could be developed. So I think that bit of time where you are just like pressing around with almost nothing is key, and it's the only way you get all the stuff that then turns into the bigger, like more ambitious projects. But I think there reaches a stage where you're like, okay, well, now we're doing this, so now we need to really decide what we do in what order and all that kind of thing, and how we get the best out of it.
Yeah, and that's sort of it'd be interesting to hear how do you find as a director coming on? So you've directed my show, and there's a number of other shows going up to the Fringe, which you've mentioned, and we'll put a list out for them, which have big varieties of different types of performers, different styles of comedy, generally all in the comedy sphere, I guess. At the moment, at least. And how do you find going into something as a director compared to making your own work?
I find it weirdly liberating doing it, and I think I felt like real sort of anxiety over how it works initially, and like the first sort of couple of shows I did, I think with Witches maybe that was the one where I think just seeing like such a big team come together around it and seeing it transform from like the silly ideas that we were back and forth in the sort of early stages of it into something that felt like a big sort of genuine theatrical production was amazing to see that like change over the months. And I think now the thing I'm always surprised by is that every show you walk into is like a completely fresh bit of input. And I think I was worried that the more shows I directed, I would end up falling into a bit of a pattern of like, I always basically just say the same thing to everyone of like, stand there, say this sort of thing, make sure you include this bit. But actually, every person's ideas are so different that all you're doing is kind of like helping them filter it, which means the way I work on each different show is completely different. It ends up sort of being tailored to like what works for the performer and what the performers come up with. So some of them work sort of more like therapy sessions of almost where we're just talking about what they're interested in and what they feel isn't working about it and how we can smooth that down. And other ones are much more kind of theatery of like, okay, let's get this scene up on its feet and do it a few times until we get it, which sort of, and I think we kind of went from one to the other with Witches of like starting with the very kind of discussive stuff and then getting to a point where it's like, right, we need to see this and do it again and again. But it's very steered by the show, I think.
Was that quite a long process, like comparatively to other shows? Because, I mean, generally, you probably have an idea for a show. In theory, there's this like... And it's changing a little bit now, but at least for the time being still, I think there's... August is Edinburgh Fringe, which is kind of the main boy. And then after that, once you've done the show there, you might take it on tour afterwards, or you might do a tour as you preview it beforehand. But generally, the whole calendar for a year is based around that. You do your show in August. Yeah. August ends, and then it's like, right, well, that show is done. You might perform it again, but it's kind of done. And then you spend, like, the next few months up until the next August working on a show, which means that you've probably got... most, and that's like if at the end of August you're already like, right, let's make a new show September, you've got 11 months to work on that. Whereas for Witches, I guess when did it start? Was it 2022? But I wonder if that's like I wonder if that is that experience. Have you had that experience with shows before?
I'd not worked on something at that. Well, I'd spent 2 years working on my Mr. Fruit Salad show before COVID in 2019. But everything else I'd ever worked on had been, as you say, that sort of like single year turnaround time. I now just think that's not a good timescale for a show. I now think it takes 2 years to make a good show, partly because like Edinburgh is so expensive, and to justify that kind of expense, I just think like you might as well take the extra time to make something really brilliant. And I now realise that the way my brain works certainly is like it takes me a year to kind of gather the ideas that I'm interested in and like gather the raw material, and then it takes a year turning those ideas into really good shows. And I think I now look back at old shows of mine and I can see that like, I was actually at the end of the year one stage where I was like, here's a bunch of fun ideas, but I hadn't given myself that extra year of like, how do I really turn those into something great? So I think now I always try to like not impose that on other people, because I don't think you can tell people what their timescale should be, but I think you can try to like encourage them to start early on things. So most of the shows I'm directing at the moment, I started on last summer-ish, I think. Well, no, two have been more recent, and 2 were ones I started last year. And I think generally I just try to kind of encourage people to give themselves the space and not feel the pressure of like, I need to get it done for this Edinburgh, because it's such an artificial deadline. Like, nobody actually cares. I think we all think that there's somebody out there in like the creative industries keeping track of what we're doing, and if we miss a deadline then we're letting them down, and Edinburgh is a deadline, but literally nobody is watching what any of us are doing. So I think we just have to be like kind to ourselves and follow the timelines that feel like they let us make the best work and are kind of like easiest on ourselves.
The Witcher show is it's about witchcraft, Venga boys, and it's also about neurodivergence. And one of the things that I wanted to ask about, as is the sort of focus of this podcast as well, is that you would describe yourself as a neurotypical person.
Guess, yeah.
Oh, hang on, wait. Sorry.
Well, I sort of I don't really know how I categorize myself with that. In that, like, I have a lot of like neurodivergent behaviors and traits, and I'm aware of the symptoms of them a lot. Like specifically like OCD. There's things that I operate under that come under the category of OCD. Like I used to work in the Maudsley Hospital in the OCD clinic, so I'm sort of very aware of like how it manifests, and I know that my brain works in the same way, but it very rarely does it in a way that causes me like distress. Like it doesn't massively get in the way of my life. It takes up a huge amount of time in my life. Like there are rituals and there are things that I do. But they don't cause me to be in crisis. And so I always think that, like, if I were to pursue it, I think that would be, like, an aspect of my life that I would probably learn a lot about. I'm not saying, like, I have it or anything like that, but I think of neurodiverse kind of diagnoses as tools that are really useful for people that are struggling, and that these things are really getting in the way of them being able to, like, live the life they want to live. And for whatever reason, that's just never been something that I have needed to look into. So I sort of see myself in this weird in-between stage of, like, semi-self-diagnosed, but also sort of not, and largely, like, neurotypical, I think, in my outlook. But I think I'm very empathetic to a lot of neurodiverse shows and creatives and stuff, because I genuinely, like, experience a lot of the same things, I think, but to a far lesser degree, if that makes sense.
My question was just meant to be, you work with a lot of neurodivergent people, what's your experience with that? And instead I've gone, how do you define yourself? What do you think of yourself as? Reveal an identity to us, which, of course, everybody's journey of diagnosis and I think viewpoint of what is divergent and what is typical is, I think, completely up to them, really. Like, it's one of the things that I think is really interesting about the conversation we have with neurodivergence, and with neurodivergence, particularly in the disability world, is that idea of people having these symptoms that present themselves, but at what point do you shift over to it being, like, you defining it as a disability to yourself? Because even if you, like, when I've received diagnoses for neurodivergent things, you'll get letters and stuff that talk you through it, and even then it says, like, not everybody considers themselves disabled with neurodivergences, and you see that on forms and things, and I think that's like, to each their own as how you measure that. But I do find it, I don't know, it's an interesting topic, and one that I don't think I have an answer for, and I think your point's really interesting there as well, that, like, I think self-diagnosis is legitimate for folks, and often actually the support you get post-diagnosis for a lot of things is the same as if you just diagnosed yourself, like advocating for yourself is the same level. But
I think that's partly why I've enjoyed working on shows that sort of explore this stuff, is because I think none of this stuff, when a show explores these things, none of them feel like unfathomable to me. I kind of understand the feelings that are trying to be expressed, but obviously not to the same extent. So to try and, like, listen and learn what somebody's experience is like that, and then to try and guide it towards something that all audiences can, like, understand, and that neurodiverse audiences can feel really, like, seen and heard by, and like, oh great, this is reflecting my experience as well, and neurotypical audiences can be sort of entertained and informed by, and go, great, I am learning about this thing. I think that's always the goal with it. So I've really enjoyed working on shows that explore that sort of aspect. I think.
And I remember as well when you did the live stream show for the Next Up festival. Was that during lockdown? I remembered you'd mentioned a lot of...
it was Impatient were putting on their sort of festival of live stream shows.
And you'd mentioned that a lot of autistic people had said that they'd related to that show.
Yeah, I had a lot of people saying, like, thank you so much for putting our experiences into this show or whatever, or for reflecting, like, the way we feel. And I think all of that show was basically a bunch of short stories I'd written in lockdown that were just expressions of, like, how I felt at various times in that lockdown. And none of them were intended to reflect anything in particular about a particular worldview or a particular experience or anything like that. But a lot of people saw that in there. So I think I'm always very reluctant to, like, tell people what they should or shouldn't see reflected in a show, and to go, no, this isn't a representation of autism, or this is, or this is, like, I think people are free to, like, everybody essentially looks for the gaps in a show where they can make it reflect themselves a little bit, because we love shows that let us think about our own lives in a different way. So I'm never going to tell somebody that they are wrong or right to see anything in there that speaks to them. You know, that can come from anywhere, I think. But I think that was one of the lovely things about the Witches show, was the fact that, like, those all those kind of elements about hyperfixation and all those other things were so picked up on and so seen by people who have that experience and understand it. But I don't think it ever forced itself to be a show where people have to understand that element of it. It's also a really entertaining show about history and about witchcraft and about the Vengaboys and things. And I think all those parallels are clearly there for people to find, but it doesn't insist on itself. It presents like a really entertaining, silly, likable show. I think that's the best way to do these things these days, is to let people find what they want to find within it, while also just like letting them see something really entertaining first and foremost.
I find that's it's interesting when there's more conversations about neurodivergent perspectives in shows. There is that because other folks have had conversations who are great, and I love their work as well, but it's an interesting conversation of making work for a neurodivergent specific audience compared to making a show for an audience that happens to be about neurodivergent things. And I'm not really sure if there's actually a difference in the practicality of it.
No, probably not.
Do you find yourself sometimes looking at shows when you work with neurodivergent creators and thinking, how do I is there a way for me to help broaden those topics out? Or is it kind of...
Yeah, I guess a little. I guess the other tricky thing is that because it's become such a kind of big conversation, and it's really great that there is more discussion about these things, but it's also it makes it harder to explore these things in a way that actually feels original, in a way. Like we've now heard so many people like shed light on these conditions and talk about them, that in a way now, if your goal is to just stand on stage and talk about what it's like for you with that condition, you sort of have to work that little bit harder to go, oh, but I also just need to make sure I'm making a funny, interesting show, which I think doesn't mean like you can't talk about those things. I just think, I think the goal should always be like you're giving the audience a great experience, and if you can also inform them about your perspective and teach them about things or reflect the audience's experience themselves, then that's fantastic. But I think, I feel like the goal principally is like make a wonderful show, and then hopefully you can also talk more about these things.
This is a slight departure. Well, no, it's not actually, because obviously we have the tarot bit in the show. For people who've seen it, who are listening to the podcast, you'll know, but for folks who haven't, I feel like this has gone very focused on the show, and it's not meant to be. But you do a lot of tarot.
It's a great show.
Thank you.
I do. I love a bit of tarot. I'm a huge fan. I got into it my girlfriend's mum is a tarot reader, and I think used to do like the odd, well, not professionally, but it's something she's really into, and it's like a big hobby of hers. And she gave me like a couple of readings, I guess, when we first got together. And I think I had always had it in my head as like, this is a silly thing. It's like sort of magic, and it's a bit sort of kitsch and weird, and it doesn't really work because I'm not. I think I'm quite a sort of like ultimately quite scientific minded, but I like the idea of there being something else. So it's fun to sort of respond to these things and like, oh, what if this was real? What if the cards did want me to think about this thing? But then I think actually having it done a couple of times, coming back to it after like a long time later, I was like, oh, actually, this is just a therapy tool. This is a really interesting kind of like, it's like Oblique Strategies or any of these other things that are just about random input and then giving your brain a series of specifics to look at. Like, okay, this card represents these 5 abstract concepts, and something about that in conversation with this other card then makes your brain find a connection that you didn't know was there. I think it's a really interesting, like, lateral thinking creative tool, basically. So now I really love it. And it's always fun to kind of do it as though it has the ritual of, like I kind of still like pretending to myself that we are doing some sort of spell, because that's part of the history of what it is in a way, and it's quite fun to lean into it and play in that world. But I think what you're actually doing every time you do some sort of tarot reading is it's a kind of like neurolinguistic programming thing of like, if you tell yourself that this pattern has come up for a reason, then your brain will start to think about what that reason would be, and in thinking about it, you'll realise what was actually going on under the surface of whatever your question was.
I think giving something the dignity of the ritual is really important.
I think it's so sort of like easy and patronising to suggest that by doing that you are an idiot. That like, oh, you know, people who do tarot actually think that like the cards are magic, or that this is your future now because it's happened. And I don't think that's true at all. I think there's something about like honouring that ritual that makes you more receptive to the interesting ideas and the surprising ideas and the new ideas.
But and I also think, what difference does it matter? In a way, it doesn't, like, whether folks are using it in a way, as long as it's helpful to you and as long as it's not being used as an oppressive tool. I think it's great. Like, I've been on like.
Oh, I do use mine as an oppressive tool.
Sure.
That's the difference with my tarot readings.
Do ask
they're really
that,
quite dictatorial. That's why they come to me.
Why have they got leather backing on, Joz? It's not important.
Don't talk about it. Yeah, I love it. Do you do much of it? Was that why you put it into the show? Is it something that you were interested in before, or is it just because it had the connection to the witchcraft stuff?
No, it's something I had over lockdown. I did a lot of magic things.
Right.
Like, I'd always been interested in magic, and during uni at Fine Art, I did performance art. But I did performance art in the way that a lot of, I imagine, art students do, where you're looking at sort of shamanism and the relationship that magic and the mystic and the mysterious has to creating things. And part of that was doing a few ritual things that certainly felt like they made me feel something. And now I'm kind of, if it's helpful for you, use it. Yeah. And I do find that...
Just don't use it to make anybody else's life worse. And then basically, like, if it's making your life better, great.
I did a Zoom vision quest over lockdown, which I really enjoyed and was, like, really supportive. But then every now and then, the person who was leading it did mention stuff about being reincarnated and how if people had long-term illnesses or disabilities, maybe they did something wrong in a previous life. And I thought, I'm not sure I like that.
That's
actually,
a shame.
Now,
that's not great.
2 hours into this, and this is the point where we find that out. And I don't care for that. But a lot of the other stuff, like the actual having a moment with a flickering candle in front of your eyes and feeling the sound, like, I did feel it move me. You know, I felt like I was seeing things in there.
It doesn't really matter, I don't think. It's all about these things that actually, like, get you to feel something. Like, we went to see a concert by there's a South African cellist called Abel Seleako, who did a concert at the South Bank Centre earlier this year, and it was his concerto in the first half, and then Beethoven's Seventh, I think, in the second half. And the first half ended with him getting the entire, like, concert hall to stand up and sing along with this, like, very simple refrain that he taught us. And me and Miranda both, like, cried our eyes out at it, because there was something about, like, 1,000 people or whatever actually just being engaged in ritual and doing something together that was phenomenal. And then the second half, they played the Beethoven from memory, and the audience seemed to, like, prefer it. They went crazy. I mean, they both got, like, standing ovations, but there was this ridiculous response to the Beethoven, which felt a little bit to do with this idea of, like, Beethoven, we love Beethoven. But there was something about that first one where I was like, the act of, like, all singing together, I was like, that was the magical thing for me. Yeah. With this idea of, like, it's a new piece by a less known person, but for me, he created, like, a better experience in the room. And I think, anything that sort of creates that sort of ritual and makes you feel differently, I think is hugely valuable. Like, whatever it is, whether you think it's silly or new or whatever.
Yeah, and I wonder if part of it is, like, this is something that's been a big thought in my head, which is that, like, there's been a recent with folklore, and I say recent, but I think it's always been there, but I think more recently there's been more of a resurgence of folklore interest, and particularly folklore as, like, a social action. And part of it is that I think that these things, these practices, these rituals, it's very easy for a lot of, like, state, a lot of science, a lot of capital focused things to be like, what is the tangible get? What do you get from that? And it's actually, it's like with arts, it's like with sports to an extent as well. It's like, if you're not, the good of those things is not through the money that is raised from it. It's actually from that intangible moment of feeling like a society, feeling like people all together in a room, feeling a moment, or being with somebody who has a deck of cards and talking about what those cards mean to each of you and what that presents to you. And that's something that you can't, to sound very like, hey man, but you can't put like you can't put a price on that.
And it sort of feels increasingly, like, radical to make those things. I think because we so kind of, like, mindlessly sleepwalk into a very sort of technocratic world where essentially it's all about, like, competition for your attention, and your attention is always being pulled in different directions by little things that are in your phone or on your computer or your email or whatever, that any any time you're able to carve out to dedicate to anything sort of ritualistic like that, whether it's going to a concert and all singing together, or doing a vision quest, or doing a tarot reading, or making a comedy show, or going to a comedy show, they all start to feel increasingly like, oh, I've chosen this thing, and it's sort of in defiance of all this other shit that I'm so bored of. So I think they can feel like, yeah, real like gifts to yourself, or little kind of acts of defiance in a way of like, I still think this is really important and really worth doing, and the only thing worth doing in a way, rather than scroll. I mean, scrolling's fun, but you can't do it all the time.
A good scroll's good. Papyrus scroll. I like those.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, the word scroll has really been done a disservice by
I think so. Because
the
I feel
attention
like
industry.
somebody brings out a scroll, and they're saying like, "I've got some news on a scroll," and you think, "Oh, here we go. This is going to be like the town crier. This is like Augustus Caesar's got some new info just about to," and then it's just some supplements in between.
Video of a guy bouncing a ball off his chest.
Somebody sharing a
and
meme.
then falling into a lake with a crocodile. That's what I get on my reels.
Is that your
all
algorithm?
the time. Yeah, guys bouncing balls off their chests and then crocodile videos. It's good stuff. Actually, these days it's always like the countries of the world, but as Greek gods. Like,
do you have a favourite tarot?
you know
card?
what I get a lot? I don't know if it's my favourite, but I get the Two of Wands an awful lot. He comes up a lot. He's the guy he's holding the world in his hands, but he's stood on a balcony and he's got like a beautiful landscape in front of him. And I think it's a little bit like it's either you've got the world in your hands, but you've got to look out there at what's in front of you, a bit like your phone, or it's the opposite. It's like you know what you want, now you got to go get it. That's the Two of Wands card, I think, if I remember rightly. But and the other one I get all the time, it's the Eight of Cups, and it's where there's a guy, he's got 8 cups stacked up, and one of them is missing. You can see that there's like, he's left space for 9.
Oh, wow.
And there's a hole for the 9th one, and he's walking off into the distance, and there's the moon's out, and he's going off to look for the other cup. And that one, I think, is about yearning. It's about the idea that, like, it doesn't matter what you've got here, you know there's something more that you need to find, and you have to go and find it. And it doesn't matter how many people tell you, well, what about your lovely 8 cups? You've got to go and look for it. And there's another one that's more about, like, where there's one where the cups are knocked over, where the guy is so sad about his knocked over cups that he can't see his standing up cups. And that one's different. That one's like, stop worrying about what you've lost, concentrate on what you have. But this one is more like, it doesn't matter. You know there's a missing piece and you've got to go looking for it. I get that all the time, and every time I get it, I'm like, oh, it's that missing piece again. I've still not found the 9th cup, but I like looking for it. So I'm a big fan of that one. What's your favourite?
I quite like the Tower.
Yeah.
I think the Tower's great.
Classic.
Tower's a good one. It's got the guy falling out of it. There's a lot to like about that. Also, I know it
means something's going to go horribly wrong, doesn't it, with the Tower?
I don't know.
But you like that. You're like, oh, good.
Or is it that you successfully escaped something bad happening?
Yeah. It's that something's going to come crashing down, but that could be the prison you've built.
It also does give big Tower of Saruman, Helm's Deep energy, which I like as well. So, Joz, we're entering more now after the magic chat. We are now entering more into the magic section of the podcast.
Okay.
So
whoa.
I'll insert a
Spooky.
sound effect here.
Is there a theme tune?
There is a theme tune.
Whoa.
That's it.
That's me trying to sing along with it, but obviously I don't know what the...
You're a keen practicer of tarot, like having it done and doing it for other people. But is there any other magic that you've witnessed in your life?
Do we count like stage magic, like Darren Brown?
Not for this purpose.
Okay, in which case, no. I've seen Darren Brown. Very good.
Never felt you've been cursed or anything, or seen a hex?
Well, I once, when I don't know if I would class this as magic, because this is more religion, but as we were saying, you know, all these things are aspects of the same thing. Once when I was a kid, I couldn't get, I installed Rayman 2, The Great Escape, on my mum's laptop, because I wanted to play it. Couldn't get it to work. Kept double-clicking the icon, wouldn't work. Very sad about it. Prayed to God and said, please God, how can I get Rayman 2? I'd never prayed before. I wasn't a praying boy, but I think I was desperate. And I didn't know I thought might as well try it at some point, and this is a real crisis. So I prayed to God, and then the thought just appeared in my head: uninstall it and reinstall it. And I uninstalled it, reinstalled it, worked fine.
Hey, a lot of people don't realise it's a ray of God's light, man.
So that was sort of magical, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd throw that in.
But then I'm not saying that every time an app doesn't work and then you uninstall it and reinstall it and then it does work. I'm not saying that's magic every time. I'm saying in that particular instance, I asked for guidance from the universe and I received it.
Yeah, I think you communed with God to get that information.
I feel bad that I sort of wasted it. Like I don't know how many times you get to do that in your life to like directly communicate with the source. And I feel like if I only get like one or two more in my life, it's a shame that one of them went... Well, actually, I disagree with what I'm saying. I loved Rayman 2. It was like a foundational experience of my life.
You mentioned before carrying out rituals in your life. Would you be willing to talk about them or say any of them?
I have a sort of an obsessive need to catalogue more or less everything I do. This is like books I read, films I watch, music I listen to. I think loads and loads of people do that. I don't think that's abnormal at all. But a while ago, I lost so I have a database that has been going back about 18 years now. And it's a catalogue of basically everything that I've done. And it all happens particularly with music, it happens in a very regimented way where like I have to listen to an album 3 times and then I have to listen to between 4 and 8 other albums it reminds me of. And then I have to listen to it 2 more times if I don't like it, 3 to 4 more times if I do like it. And then it gets cross-referenced into a separate list. There are like 3 separate lists that I keep track of, blah, blah, blah. So it's just a very, very obsessive, like nerdy music list, which doesn't necessarily... mean anything, but last year I lost it. My computer died and I hadn't backed up the thing and I lost all these lists and my reaction to it was like borderline hysterical. Like I was so upset by it. So that was sort of the realization point of like, oh, this is doing something else in my brain that I was unaware of before. Before it was like a kind of unconscious ritual that I had to complete constantly and I need to update it like multiple times a day in order to just function. And most of the time I don't notice that until it's gone, and then I feel very adrift. So I think, there's a tendency there to like need to catalogue and rank and rate the things I'm doing in my life in order to have done them, sort of thing. And I also do a lot of like tapping on things as I pass them. In certain things like that are like more unconscious that I haven't really like got to the bottom of yet, but things that I recognize from like from talking to people with similar things that I recognize the compulsion to do it, but I'm still at the thin end of understanding like what it means for me or why.
In my head, Joz, when you're tapping things, you need like a cane. I think a cane would look really good if you went like a,
twirl it around.
What is that? It's Who Framed Roger Rabbit, when Judge Doom has the cane and he keeps knocking on stuff.
Oh,
you could
my style icon.
Take the cane and you could tap those things. Would that be better or worse, do you think?
I reckon probably an improvement, because it would look more like a stylistic choice rather than just a nervous habit.
Like a pork pie hat you could have in your hand and turns
it
into a
that'd be nice.
Although this does just feel like I'm encouraging you to mask behaviour in this scenario now. What are you listening to at the moment?
At the moment, I am listening to the new Counting Crows album. Once I have listened to it, hang on, let me check. I then need to listen to Automatic for the People by R.E.M., Whatever and Ever Amen by Ben Folds 5, 10 by Pearl Jam, Woodface by Crowded House, and All That You Can't Leave Behind by U2. Then I go back and listen to the new Counting Crows albums probably 2 more times. I don't think I love it. I think it's going to go into I don't think it's going to make it onto list number 2, which is the list of the best albums I've listened to. It will make it onto list number 1, which is every album I've listened to.
Does this ever feel like a slog, or is it fun to do the process?
I really like it. The thing I've got better at noticing is the way in which it gets in the way for other people. Like specifically Miranda, because we live together and I can be a prick about what we listen to. I can be like, we have to listen to... I'll like present the options of like, we need to listen to Crowded House, U2, R.E.M. or da-da-da-da, and she'll be like, well, I don't like any of that. Why do we have to do that? So I'm getting better at realising that when I'm listening to things with other people, I can just put on something that we all want to listen to, and that's fine. But historically, I've had a real, like, I do not listen to things outside of the list. Because the list is also... I did some maths the other day. It would take me, at its current length, the list would take me 4 years to get to the end of. I have a list of albums I'm going to listen to, and it's currently 4 years long.
That's long.
And I'm wondering whether to then stop. Maybe I should not add any more to the list and just say...
When you've completed it.
Then just never listen to anything again.
And give up on you completed music at that point.
Well, that's that. So I did 4 full years of not... Because the problem is it just keeps getting long. I just keep hearing of other albums.
Yeah, because they keep making them, which is rude.
I know. Films, I keep hearing of... I think I'm ultimately... I've actually managed to... After I lost them in the data loss thing, I managed to do a bit of like psychological work on myself. I think it's all about being afraid of death. Because I don't think that I am afraid of death. I don't go around thinking, oh, I'm scared of when I'm going to die. But whenever I think about the fact that I will not listen to every album and I will not see every film and I will not read every book, I feel awful about that. I have this need to be like, I need to complete it. I need to complete the set. And obviously you can't do that because we talk about the entire like creative output of the human race. So I won't manage it. But for some reason it's very important to me to document what I did manage to get through. Where I'm like, well, I listened to these ones.
Have you got the best album you've ever heard on your list?
Crime of the Century by Supertramp.
Really?
It's the greatest album of all time. Yeah, it's great.
But Automatic for the People's right there.
I don't even like R.E.M. That's the terrible thing. Like, the reason R.E.M. is on there is because according...
Oh, but wait, Joz, so, hang on. So, you're listening to an album you don't really like.
Yeah.
But also, as well as listening to that, you have to listen to
other albums I don't really like. Yeah, because I don't...
4 albums you also do...
I've got to listen to albums by similar artists. So I'll go to Last FM and look up similar artists to Counting Crows, and then the ones that I have already listened to, I'll listen to each of those in order to place the new album into its correct historical context. So I have to listen to some R.E.M. to be like, oh yeah, R.E.M. aren't very good. I guess Counting Crows are a bit like them.
I need to put a content warning at the start of this episode.
Yeah,
this
sorry.
is crazy.
Well, I like some songs.
It's all right. You're allowed your
R.E.M.
opinion. It's a me thing. Thank you so much for joining us in the cosmic realm that is iPod A Spell on You. Now.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Please, what is your problem that you've brought today?
My 21st century problem, is that I want to be able to get stuff from my phone to my computer and vice versa immediately without needing to go through an intermediary phase like emailing it to myself. I just want it to be there.
Not just like a cable.
Well, that's a great point. So when I plug a cable into my phone and then plug it into my computer, then it says, do you want to transfer files? And I say yes. And then on my computer, I can see the files in my phone. Great. That's what I want. But everything's wireless these days. So why do we have to do it with a cable? And I know AirDrop exists, but for a start, AirDrop is only for iPhones. I don't have an iPhone. Okay. And also, you still have to AirDrop it to yourself. You have to say, like, right, AirDrop now, and then you have to go to your Air... I want to be able to take the picture on my phone and then go to my laptop, and the picture's there. And also, I want to be able to type something on my laptop where it's easier to type, and then copy it, and then paste it on my phone.
Yeah.
Okay. Because sometimes you want to post something on your phone because of Instagram having different features available on your phone, but I want to type it on my computer because it's easier to type, and I don't want to have to email that to myself.
Yeah.
I want to just copy, paste. I want them to be like the same device, but and for them to speak to each other. I feel like that. Maybe that does exist, but I feel like that should exist by now.
Okay, so there's like mirrored screen, and this is this why what is the issue that this is presenting to you?
It's just like constant time, like dead time, you know? It's like to get the picture and be like, oh, I want to put that on my website, but I only know how to edit my website on my laptop, so I'll email it to myself. Or I want to put that as the caption for my Instagram post, I'll email it to myself. So it's like 10 seconds every time. And 10 seconds isn't long, but 10 seconds every time I want to do that is long. And I think it sounds like something that technology should have done by now. You know, like it doesn't sound crazy to me that your phone and your laptop should be the same device and they talk to each other and they have access to the same stuff.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound mad. And I just think, why are we wasting this little bit of time every day, multiple times every day, because the tech companies haven't solved the problem yet. They've got to solve the problem. Forget AI, or is this AI? Is what I'm describing AI?
No, I don't think it sounds like a sort of
That's a different thing, right?
TOPS, a type of a syncing mirroring device, like an operating system on both.
Yeah, I want them constantly syncing with each other.
Would be the 21st century solution to that. That's what I'd suggest is 20, but that's not where we're looking at, because this sounds to me like a sort of torture, right?
What, having to email things to myself all the time?
Yeah, what you're experiencing, like these minutes being stolen off you, is a sort of torture.
Yeah, it's like water torture. It's the drip on my head.
Yeah, exactly.
Every day.
And so that's why I think I've got as a spell for you. As a solution. So I've dived into my grimoire library, and I've got...
Thank you so much.
The Petit Albert, or Petit Albert, which is... there's also the companion piece, which is, would you believe it, Le Grand Albert.
Oh, the Big Albert.
The Big Albert, Little Albert. I imagine...
Who was Albert? Was he the wizard who wrote the spellbook?
I couldn't possibly comment, and I shan't comment.
Right. Okay.
I like to imagine that there were two Alberts in a pub, and one was like 6'5" and the other was like 5'9", which is still kind of it's not,
actually above average. Yeah.
But he's Little Albert because of the nature.
The nature of Big Albert.
So this is a book that was originally published sort of circa 18th century. Nobody necessarily knows the exact date of it, and it would have been one of these that came around with like tips on astrology, tips on how to make perfume. There's advice in here about how to fish well, which has like a bit of a recipe for some bait, which we did try once. But what I've got for you, Joz, is this is a spell to make a person insensible to torture.
Ooh.
So I figure,
that's good.
You're experiencing torture right now, and whilst maybe at some point technology will meet up so that you can sync your phone and your computer to be one single operating device in different formats, what I actually think for the time being you might need,
I need to be able to send the emails to myself without thinking, ugh.
Joz, you need protection from the foibles of technology, and I'm here to provide this to you.
Thank you. This is a great idea. This is just what I need.
So I will read it out loud. Please feel free to dive in and ask any questions as I go.
Okay.
I will report the details of what I learned from Mr. Bamberge.
Who's Mr. Bamberge?
Well, actually, hang on. It does explain it.
Oh, was he about to say? Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
I wasn't sure if that was just going to be dropped and moved on, and I thought, as he told me to ask questions, that was... Immediately I was thrown by that.
No, that's fine. That's on me.
But they're going to explain. That's my apologies for interrupting.
Well, some of it will be explained, some of it won't be explained.
So I'll give things the benefit of the doubt more as we go on.
As I say this, I do realise that I've said some things might and won't. It's not like that's part of the test. Okay. It's not like a quiz where you have to go, was that explained?
Yeah.
That's not.
Who was Mr. Bamberge? Were you paying attention?
I learned of Mr. Bamberge, famous criminal judge at Oxford.
There we go.
Which I'm assuming is Oxford. Mm-hmm. He said he had seen several times in certain cases there that torture was sometimes insufficient to draw testimony from the charged, since their crimes had been committed in secret, and that it was difficult to find witness, though there were strong presumptions against them, and that these people tried so hard to keep their crimes a secret that the court had to release others to secure their testimony. There are some as well who perform incantations. This is the bit where...
So wait, hang on. So he's saying there that for some people torture doesn't work because the thing they don't want to reveal is a secret. Isn't that true of all torture is to discover secrets, isn't it? You wouldn't torture somebody to discover something that was already publicly known because that would just be horrible.
Yeah, no.
I mean, all torture is horrible. I'm not saying if it's a secret then it's worth doing, but... I don't understand why he says that some people are insensible to torture because their crimes were secret.
So I think what Mr. Bamberge has said is that, they've been accused of this crime, but nobody saw them do the crime.
Right.
And they're not willing to admit that they've done the crime. And yet, nevertheless, they know, despite no evidence, no discernible logical fact, they know they've done the crime, and they need to torture them in order to get that information from them. But, and this is where the case is curious, some of these people seem to be insensible to the torture. The torture that, at this time, they all know is a foolproof way of getting the testimony when there is no witness or legal process available to them. So they normally would torture, but there's some of these guys that you won't believe it.
Aren't responding to
Could you imagine? The torture doesn't work under.
Doesn't make them say, okay, I see. I see what's happening
This is how they've managed to do that.
Right.
So there are some, as well, who perform incantations to protect themselves from torture's effects. Others keep spells written on parchment on their person. Here are 3 verses they speak when tortured to defend against it. So this is, I will say this to you, and if you can say these out loud as part of helping you with this.
Yeah.
So I will send this written down to you, and you can put it on
and then
the
I can
parchment
read
as
it
well.
out every time I send myself an email.
Yeah. Imparibus meritus tria. Do you like the rolling R's I'm doing?
Yeah, that was
is
nice.
Good?
Yeah, that was really good.
Thanks, mate. Imparibus meritus tria doring corpore ramis. So, do you want to give that a go?
In paribus meritus tria. What happened after tria?
Doring corpore ramis.
Care ramis.
Okay.
Wow, that was good.
So, then we've got Dismas e gastas in medio is protestas divina.
Dismas e gestas in provido.
Medio. In medio is protestas divina.
In medio is protestas divina.
I'm not sure if the accent I've committed to is offensive or not, so I will apologise ahead of time.
No, I think it's sort of Italian, right?
I think so. I think it's Latin we're reading.
Yeah.
Damnatur dismas, gestas have astra levator.
Damnas de gestas natrus. No, I've lost this one.
Damnata dismas.
Damnata dismas.
Gestas have astra levator.
Gestas havastras levatur.
Perfect. There. So you'll say those 3 verses when you're tortured to defend against it.
So do I need to do this every time I email myself a photo now? Because I feel like actually this will make it take longer.
So here's the next bit. Here are more words spoken when they are currently applied to torture.
Okay.
As the pale and glorious Virgin Mary was sweet and gentle to our Lord Jesus, such is this torture soft and the rope gentle to my body.
That's nice.
So do you want to give that one a go?
As the pale and gentle Virgin Mary was sweet to our Lord Jesus Christ, such is this torture soft and the rope gentle to my body. Maybe I'll copy that into the body of the email as well.
I recognise the first to use these kinds of charms, and he surprised us all by his resistance to torture. Because after the first questioning, he seemed to sleep soundly as though in his own bed, without lamenting, complaining, or crying. When they had continued the torture a couple of times, he continued in his resistance, which made us suspect that he was provided with some enchantment, and to check if this was the case, he was made to strip naked. After a thorough search, found on him a small paper, which was the figure of the 3 kings. Do you know the 3 kings?
We 3 kings of Orient are.
That's right, yes. Got Balthazar and the other 2.
Casper, Melchior.
There we go. So you needed a little drawing of them, might be helpful.
Okay, cool.
So with these words on the other side of it, so this is beautiful star who delivered the Magi from the persecution of Herod, deliver me from this torment.
Beautiful star who delivered the Magi from the persecution of Herod, deliver me from this torment.
So I think I will do a little picture of the 3 kings for you. I'll send that
Great,
over.
That's nice, thank you. And then, maybe I can vary which of these spells I use each time so that I don't get too bored by it. If I'm having to do this multiple times a day, then maybe I can rotate between these 3 different spells.
Yeah, you've got options.
And that gives me back a bit of variation in my day, which I think is the problem. That's the problem every time I do this, is it's like, the same old thing again. Whereas now I have 3 magic spells to choose from, which starts to make it a bit more fun again.
Is there a risk that you're going to make a list where you do one of these
of
4 to 6 times?
Yeah, and then I have to keep track of I need to do the second one now because I did the first one last time. Yeah, maybe.
Could you give that a go for us?
I think that's great. I think that's going to help a lot.
Cool.
Going forwards.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
No problem. So I'll send those over to you and give them a go.
Great.
And if you can, send us in a week or so's time a voice note to let us know how that's happened. If you find that the torture's been really, there's no right or wrong, because obviously, now I know that I'm magic. I have magic within my blood.
Yeah.
A lot of this is just to see what my magic speciality is.
Okay. Yeah. So just helping you whittle down to.
Yeah. So if I can help with torture, that's quite useful.
That's useful to know. Well, I'll pass it back. I'll report back in a week's time.
Great. Thanks, Joz. And thanks very much for coming along and joining us on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Is there anything at the moment you'd like to plug or promote?
I guess doing this new show that we talked about at the Edinburgh Fringe in August and doing some previews in various places in the lead up to it. So we'd love to see one of those. I'm also releasing, we made a crowdfunded sitcom pilot at the end of last year, which we'll be releasing in the summer. So I don't know exactly where or how or in what way we'll be releasing it yet. But do keep an eye out for it because it's I'm very proud of it. Everyone's done an amazing job on it. I think that's everything at the moment.
Yeah, and of course you're on the social medias. That's
true. At Joz Norris on most of those, I think. Not all of them. I got kicked off Facebook. Got a mailing list, yeah. Joz Norris at substack.com or something. Or substack.com/Joz Norris. If you search for Joz Norris on Substack, that'll bring up something, I reckon.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Joz. And I look forward to hearing how this has gone.
Thank you for solving my problem.
Well, look, we don't know yet.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how things go. Time will tell.
But I do appreciate the quiet confidence.
Yeah. I feel good about it.
Right.
Thank you so much. Bye!
Well, there we go. Thank you, Joz, for joining us. And thank you, the listener, for listening. And thank me, Eddie Hurst, also. Why not? Let's just be generous with the thanks, I say. And what a great conversation with Joz. So interesting to hear about his process. And also, I do think maybe we spoke about my show a lot more than I was anticipating too, because Joz is a very generous man, and I think that he was sort of like, oh, I'm on this show and I directed it, so let's talk about that a lot. And I realise, as I say this, I am prone to overthinking, so perhaps that is just the case. But nevertheless, I hope you found that interesting, and found it interesting hearing about his work. And what I do think is, I can't hold on to it anymore. That it's just a real decision of a way to choose to listen to an album. But you know what? It makes him happy, and who am I to judge him for it? Who am I? Who are any of us? You can follow Joz at Joz Norris, JOZNORRIS, on social media. He's on most of them, I believe. I think he's most active on Instagram. Perhaps he also has a mailing list called the Fruit Salad Tapes that you can sign up to, and I would recommend it. It's really interesting. His thoughts on art, on creating, on making shows, and also just news about him. You can listen to his Radio 4 sitcom, The Dream Factory. Some of those episodes are on iPlayer. They come on and off it as and when. And his upcoming show is You Wait, Time Passes. That is at 7:10 at the Pleasance Dome every day at the Fringe, I believe, except for one day that I'm not sure. The Fringe has changed this year, so that it used to be that everyone had the same day off, but everyone doesn't have the same day off now. So there is one day which he won't be doing the show, and I can't tell you what that day is. However, I can tell you that Eddie Hurst's Wonderfull Discoverie of Witches in the Countie of Himself days off are the 5th to the 7th of August. Quite early in the run. I got a wedding to go to, so that's happening then, and that's 2:20 p.m. at Roxy Downstairs. But enough of that. We now have a message from the void of WhatsApp. From Joz, saying how the spell went. Do you think he managed to get through solving that issue of getting files from his phone to his computer with no barrier? I'll be honest, this one did seem like less of an achievable one through magic, but hey, you never know. So here we go.
Imparibus meritis tria during copreramis, dismas et gestas in mediovis protestas divina, damnatur dismas gestas havastra levator. As pale and glorious Virgin Mary was sweet and gentle to our Lord Jesus Christ, such is this torture soft and the rope gentle to my body. Oh, sorry about that, Eddie. You caught me reciting my chants that you sent me. I've been reciting them every day, of course, as instructed. I'll be honest, I've forgotten what I'm supposed to do with the third piece of paper, which was a beautiful drawing of the three wise men, Melchior, Balthazar, and Gaspar. I can't remember what I was supposed to do with that one, but I've been looking at it and just going, those guys, while completing the chants. So I hope that was the right thing. As for how I've been getting on with the spell, I'll be honest, you might be able to hear and find it quite difficult to speak at the moment because I have possibly an ulcer, a mouth ulcer, or some other kind of soreness that is causing my mouth to hurt quite a bit. I often get it when I'm stressed and run down. I think it might be happening because, whereas before I was stressed about getting things off my phone onto my computer and vice versa, I think I'm now stressed about a number of more actively pressing things that are really demanding my attention. You know, an upcoming Edinburgh Fringe run, for instance, maybe. Could it be that? So what that does mean is that in the last couple of weeks, I haven't really thought very much about
the stress of getting things off my phone onto my computer. That could mean a couple of things. It could mean that maybe when I came to you for help, I was at a time in my life when I didn't have that many hugely pressing sources of stress. And because that's unusual for me, I looked for it and created it elsewhere and decided that I was stressed about the fact that I wanted to get photos easily transferred between my devices. Could be that. Or, more likely, I think that these chants may have done the trick, because I'm certainly not stressed about getting things off my phone anymore. So I owe you an enormous thank you. You've changed my life. I would say for the better, but obviously, as I said, I'm now stressed and sore and run down and in pain about other things. So I guess you've changed my life so that it is now different. And that's great. Thank you so much for my magic spell, Eddie. I couldn't have done it without you.
Well, there we go. Another success. One of the things that I have been really surprised about in this show is the level of success is a lot more than you would anticipate for a man who is very much early in the magic game. But you know what? Nobody said that magic has to make your life better. The spell just has to work. And it sounds like it absolutely works. So here we go. Success. So thank you very much again to Joz for coming on the show, and sorry for those stresses that he seems to have outside of his life. You know what could remedy that is if you buy a ticket for a show, 7:10 at Pleasance, you wait time passes. Please do like, rate, share the show. The more people that hear about it and listen to it, the bigger we come, the more episodes you do, and all that is great. Like I said earlier, I do have a crowdfunder now. The rewards have ended. But if you still want to support this podcast being made and the run at Edinburgh and the tour of the show afterwards, then, that's available for you if you want to do that. If not, I appreciate it. I get it. There's lots of things going on at the moment. It's a tough time. But thank you very much for listening to I Put a Spell on You, and I will see you next week with our next guest, the fantastic Welsh comedian Steffan Allen. So you can follow me at EDYHURST on social media, eddiehurst.co.uk where my mailing list is, and then you'll hear about the upcoming tour news there. So thank you very much, guys, and I will lead you out in a rendition on this ghost piano. Here we go. Bye! No, that sounds absolutely awful. I'm getting that on Facebook Marketplace immediately.